But Ephesians chapter 4, verse 30, starting, it says, "Do not grieve God's Holy Spirit by the way you live. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of malicious behavior. Instead, be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God, through Christ, has forgiven you." If we have the wrong view of God, as our prayer of confession just pointed out that we often do, this passage is just a laundry list of our own failings. But we need to read the passage with a picture of God as our Abba Father, as God, the Father that has adopted us. In many adoption stories, the children have difficult relationships with food oftentimes. For our girls, it was a simple story of picky eating, and they really had a hard time eating any proteins that weren't processed meats, and even a very select few of those. But in more severe situations, there's been a history of neglect, or the children often went without food. And I heard a story of a family in Southern California that adopted a boy who had a tough relationship with food, and he would hide food in his room, and his adoptive parents, were confused by this, but the story came out that this poor boy was often locked in his room for days upon end without food, and so he would resort to hiding the food so that he knew that he could eat in these days. And when the good father, the adoptive father, heard this and understood this, do you think that he was angry at this boy for doing this, for hiding the food? Of course not. He would not scold his son, saying, "You better not do this, or you're not going to be a part of this family." The father was grieved by these actions. He was grieved by the history that his son had to go through, had to live through. His response to the son was that you don't have to live that way anymore. Not when you live in this family. In this family, you have food all the time, whenever you need it. If we have the wrong view of God, then we think he's looking down on us and waiting for us to sin so that he can judge us. But instead, our God is standing next to us, telling us that we don't have to live that way anymore. Amen. We don't have to live, as the verse says, we don't have to live with bitterness, with rage, with anger. We don't have to live with harsh words or slander or malicious behavior. He has adopted us into his kingdom, into his family, so that we can have a new life and live it more abundantly. In this family, in this kingdom, we are kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, not as a list of attributes that we need to have in order to become part of this family, but as a response to already being in this family. And notice how the passage ends. Just as God, through Christ, has forgiven you. He's already forgiven you before you fix all your stuff. God has forgiven you, and so I can declare that your pardon is assured.